We're here. We're going.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Oh my gosh.
This is great.
Oh gosh, I'm going to edit that squeal out. That was embarrassing.
No, that was good.
Okay, great.
I liked it.
Welcome to Adaptation. It is a podcast about stories turning into other forms of stories, whether that be book, short story, even video games to movies, TV shows, short stories, short films. We're going to talk about it all because there's no new stories, just new ways of telling it. So, my name's Kelsey, I'm one of the hosts, and who are you?
Hi guys, I'm Eric. I'm the co-host here, graciously sitting in with my good friend Kelsey.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for tuning in. We'll do all the nice housekeeping at the very end, and we're just gonna roll right into it. Well, basically every episode we're gonna talk about a different thing, right? Yeah. So today we're talking about Where the Crawdads Sing. Lovely book by, I forget the author.
Delia Owens.
Delia Owens,
Yeah.
okay. Yes, lovely Delia.
Yeah.
We love Delia.
Yeah.
We are going to go do you want to go into maybe the story in general? Or like...
I feel like that's a pretty good place to
yeah.
start.
I'll give us my synopsis.
Sure.
My log line, if you will, and then I want to see what yours is.
Yeah.
In comparison to that.
Okay.
So basically, I think the story is about a girl who is ostracized from the rest of her community and is subsequently on trial for murder throughout the book because everyone thinks she done it, even though we don't know if she did it or not. But basically, yeah, it's a story of a poor young girl.
Yeah.
A poor young girl set aside from the general public for things outside of her control. So, what would you say? Any details I missed in that log?
No, I think that's a nice general setup. I think that this is essentially a slice of life Americana story, not unlike Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, that focuses in on a very specific set of people, in this case specifically one isolated woman, and how that feeds into notions of justice in American life, especially in the 50s and 60s.
That is a very good comparison. The entire time I was reading this book, I was like, it was very alluding to Kill a Mockingbird.
Delia is trying to summon Harper Lee in a big way.
I think she did a decent job.
Yes.
For the most part. There were some things I liked, obviously.
Yeah.
And some things I didn't like.
Yeah.
What did you not like
overall,
in general?
This was an interesting one to wrap my head around. I was reading about the book and the firestorm that it kind of created in the fiction community. I mean, this was at a time when fiction was struggling from a sales standpoint, that there was a real challenge and struggle for writers to catch on. When Delia Owens wrote this book, she only ordered, I think 28,000 copies were only ordered for the book.
Wait, wasn't this her first?
I believe so.
This is her breakout novel.
Yeah, because she's written works on naturalism and conservation in the past, I believe, with her husband. But this was her foray into fiction, and it kind of defied a lot of what people expected about consumers and what they were looking for. And then Reese Witherspoon put it into her book club, gave it her seal of approval. And
Nice, coming in clutch.
And it just blew up, just exploded. And it was just the confluence of a bunch of different things, but it's just so wrapping my head around that was the first challenge, and then sort of zeroing in on what I think her intentions were. And I think what I liked about the book, I'll start with what I liked. What I liked was the sense of place that it evokes.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huge, massive spoilers.
If you have not read the book and you don't want to be spoiled, please turn this off.
This is
right
where
now.
you stop.
Yeah.
Because there's stuff about to happen.
Oh, yes.
Stuff's about to go down.
I want to preface that in case you stumbled upon us. And,
in a big way.
In a big way.
Internet verse.
Anyway, continue, Sweetie.
This evokes a sense of place in a way that, again, that To Kill a Mockingbird did. It created and painted a very specific portrait of a place and time. And it really built in so many details. And I remember reading the first half of the book, just her like traveling around the marsh or spending time like fishing with her father or going to jump-ins. Like it really does create the sense of isolation around her. And I have to give her credit for that, because it really becomes the spine of the story. And it really sums up the theme.
The theme of shit, this girl had a lot of bad stuff happen to her.
Yeah.
Like, it was like the entire time just she kept having stuff thrown at her.
Yeah.
And maybe we can break this down to like acts or story structure.
Sure, yeah.
A little bit.
Because it's part 1 and 2, right?
Yeah.
It's the marsh and the swamp.
Yeah, there's 2 different parts. And each part is just filled with like this girl. Her name's Kaya, by the way, folks. Main Catherine Clark. Yeah. Who just gets stepped on her whole freaking life. And Delia Owens creates such a sympathy for this character, but I don't feel bad.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, wow, that fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But I was like optimistic that she would get through it because she already got through all this other crap. So
there's a strength of character.
There's a strength. She's a very strong character for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
But what would the theme? What would you narrow the theme down before we break down actual story points?
Well, so I think this is where it is, again, I think useful to bring in the author's life. Because the controversy that surrounded the book, or a big part of it, when the movie especially came out, was the story relating to a 1996 incident, which took place in, I believe, the nation of Zambia, where she, who was doing conservation work in Zambia, and there was a news report being recorded, and then you see a man being shot on screen, and then additional shots off screen. The man was killed, and there were questions surrounding her involvement and her family's involvement in the incident, because it was later suggested, perhaps, that her son was accused by some, which she has denied, is essentially suggesting that her son Christopher was not there at the time. And so there are questions surrounding it, and she's wanted for questioning still in Zambia along with her husband, and has been told by the U.S. Embassy not to return. It is very hard not to draw comparisons to her life, her philosophy of what she's done in the world, especially how she's carried out some of her conservation efforts in Africa, that she probably projects a sense of isolation onto this character. That's a bit of supposition, it's some assumption, but given the parallels to some of those events, it's hard not to block those out. It's hard not to consider them a factor. And I think it leads into the theme of the story being a sense of isolation and otherness from other people. Mm-hmm. A relationship with nature that she doesn't really have with human beings in the same way. And I think it reflects in someone who sees nature as being, there's a great line where she describes the idea of the marsh or the environment doesn't consider death a sin. It's not like, it's this idea of she can look to nature and understand and see these properties playing out, and it helps her understand the world better than her relationship with human beings. And it's hard not to see some of those parallels play out in her life. So I think that's kind of where the theme originates and probably where it comes from to an extent.
Oh yeah, for sure. I didn't do as much background research on actual Delia as you did. So it's interesting to hear it first right now, because my first thought was, in coordination with the character, with those events in Africa, was she projecting her sense of like isolation because people are, all the accusations against Kaya in the book, onto herself from that situation? And they're 2 very different events.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting that she brought kind of a parallel.
It certainly feels that way, because I never want to make too many assumptions about what an author brings specifically unless they say it.
Yeah, she has not said it. We're going to disclaimer that she has not said this.
This is all conjecture and discussion about the context.
Exactly. But it's very interesting that she, even just like having witnessed that incident, to bring all writers bring life into their characters as they do.
Yeah.
And her views, I guess, or Kaya's views in the book on death itself, like you said from that quote, was very not shocking to me.
Yeah.
But normal.
Yeah.
It's never really articulated as like death is a normal thing in books.
Yeah.
Usually it's death is a tragedy.
Yeah.
This is a tragic story.
Yeah.
But in Where the Crawdads Sing, it by the end was it's a natural process of life.
Yeah.
It's a man eat man world.
Yeah. Dog
eat dog. Stuff happens. We move on.
Yeah.
And that was something very interesting for me reading the book. I don't know about you, but I was like, all the shit that's happening to her, she never blamed anybody.
No, not really. Not individually, no.
Not individually. There's one point where it was very like midway through the first act where she was like screaming into the marsh.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Jody.
Yeah.
Where it was very like blaming, but then when she finally realized not to blame herself at the end of the first half, you saw her become a new person.
That's right.
In terms of like part 1 to part 2, and in coordination with the author itself, maybe this was her way of working through that event.
It's a possibility, yeah.
Of like blaming, maybe forgiveness of herself for what happened, even though it hasn't been fully resolved.
Yeah, that's the thing that really complicates it, because I think everything you just said is correct. And I think that's the thing that complicates it is there was some sense of finality probably for her and probably the people surrounding the event, and it is a thing that would test anyone, and I think it's probably inevitable that some of that psychologically wound up here.
Yeah, you never could really people process stuff differently.
Yeah,
it's interesting how writers process in general.
Yeah, as an actor, that's something that I can say absolutely is true. Because I have a lot of friends, including Kelsey, who I've worked with across the table, on projects where I bring a very different sensibility as someone who's reading the material and interpreting it. And talking to a writer about the process is fascinating because it just feeds the process even more.
If we could get Delia
on
this podcast, just interview the actual author of one or even the interpretation of it by the screenwriter. That would be freaking dope. Hey, Delia, what's up?
Yeah.
But let's get into, maybe we'll do character, just a list and little nuggets of who the main players are in the story before we get into what kind of happens. We can't go. So the thing about this podcast, we can't tell you all of the details.
Yeah.
Because this isn't an audiobook. We're not reading you the book.
Yeah.
We're just going to give you bullet points, again, spoilers.
Yeah.
And compare those bullet points to the recreation or adaptation that we see on the screen.
Yeah.
So I'll do a character, you do a character.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. There's always side players in books. That's the benefit of having a long form.
Yeah.
You have more room to play.
Yeah.
This one is like 384 pages or something like that. 368. I was close.
Nice.
Sort of. So these are just the main players that you need to know. Know that when we say townsfolk, at least for me, it references a bunch of people. So first character, obviously, is the main character, Catherine Clark.
Yeah.
She has a middle name. I am blanking on it right now. Yeah. But she's known by everyone as Kaya.
Yeah.
Mainly because in the book she said that she couldn't actually say her name, or she started to refer to herself as Kaya.
Yeah.
So we're going to refer to her as Kaya as well. She's also known by the townsfolk in the local town of Barkley Cove as the Marsh Girl.
Yeah.
Which in many terms in this time period was termed as a derogatory term for somebody who is probably uneducated.
Yeah.
Ostracized, not really of the herd.
Yeah.
And she, throughout the story, like we mentioned earlier, learns to accept herself. But she was abandoned by all of her family. That's a very important part.
Mm-hmm.
Right in the beginning of the book, her older brother, I think, leaves first. Her mom leaves.
Her mom, then the sisters, I believe.
Okay.
And then Jody.
Well, she had an older brother too.
Yeah, you're right. There was the older
Murph.
brother. I think you're right. Jody was the last one to
Yeah,
leave.
Jody, a brother closest to her in age.
That's right.
I think that they left when she was like 5 or 6. He was like 8 or 10. But subsequently, mom leaves because of abusive dad.
Yeah.
Oldest brother, 2 middle sisters, youngest son.
Yeah.
And she's left all alone with her abusive papa.
Yeah.
And then she meets who?
She meets Mr. Tate Walker, who was a friend of her older brother's. And they develop a kinship through their navigation of the marsh, and Tate develops a sense of protectiveness over Kaya, and is in fact interested in pursuing later on his fascination with naturalism and ecology professionally. And so he has you get this sense, an educator's mindset, and really takes an interest in teaching Kaya to read, gifts her with science texts, and it helps her interpret her surroundings from a different viewpoint. And they do develop a romantic attachment, romantic relationship, a relation, if I can call it anything. Yeah. It's a podcasting situationship that becomes complicated by the circumstances, and that sort of sets her off in motion to a much less healthy relationship with
Chase Andrews. Golden Boy Chase Andrews, Barkley Co. best quarterback they've seen in years. Yeah. They reference that a fuck ton, including in the movie.
Yeah.
Basically, he was a local golden boy, also known as a womanizer, who initially goes to Kaya on an off chance to better, for all intents and purposes. He says it turns into more. The relationship somewhat blossoms, but he ends up showing his true colors down the line, looking very similar in action to her dad. So, not great. He's also, and we'll get to the plot of everything, he's also the murder victim in the story. So he is found at the bottom of a fire watchtower, dead. Just dead.
Yeah.
But along with Chase Andrews, there's other important characters in the story. I can name like 2 or 3. Go off for it with another one.
I can name a very important couple of characters, and that's going to be Jumpin' and Mabel, who operate the sort of marsh stop for boaters coming through to resupply and gas up. A young Kaya, after being abandoned by her father, comes to see them as a support system, and they take her under their wing, so to speak, and she learns to sell mussels through them for money, and they help her with donations of clothing and donations of food, and they become caretakers for her as she navigates her life in the backwaters of this town. And I think that really forms the spine of her support system, along with Tate. And let me think if there's... I do think that it merits her father, like a separate discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Because he is... This is one of those situations where the differences between the book and the film really... They paint the same picture in much more detail here in the book.
Oh, yeah. Like we mentioned it, we have more room to play. 360-some pages to play versus a little over 2 hours in the movie.
And there's such an interesting passage in the book when they discuss the war injury that sends him home, that it really sort of dissects his cowardice in the run-up to that incident, which then sort of painted him in a very different light to the public and to his community. And when he marries Kaya's mother, whose name is, I'm looking to confirm, maybe I think she has a
In the
name.
book, it's Maria Jacques.
Yes, that's it.
In the book.
In the Bible, she's listed there too.
Yeah, in the Bible.
In the opening.
Yeah.
Detailing her family
in both
lineage.
the book and the movies, they do have real names mentioned, but they all go by Ma.
Yeah. And who sort of entices Ma into this life in the swamps when he finds that sort of modern life is too difficult for him. And after feeding her a lot of promises, they end up in a difficult position. And so her only real meaningful relationships are with her children. And so it really details how his sense of cowardice and overriding failure sort of strands them in this position instead of maybe having him accept a different place in his life, a different meaning for his life.
That is a very distinct difference between the book and the movie, because in the movie, Pa is just portrayed as an abusive alcoholic,
which he is, absolutely,
war vet, which is the very surface level character development. There are some little details they kept in there that kind of spice it up a little bit in the movie, but nothing to the extent of the 10 to 15 pages you got of background on Pa, which doesn't make you like him by any means. Actually makes you hate him a little bit more. But you kind of feel more for her mother after knowing more about her dad.
The journey that she had to take as a result of being chained to the man. Yeah. And even her relationship with her father, again, you don't like the man in either the book or the film.
Yeah.
But you come to understand the fuller sense of gravity of the situation.
Why?
You come because you understand him in so much more detail. You also see why Kaya still clung to the affection that she got to have with him at all, because this is the last family available to her. Mm-hmm. Everyone else has disappeared. When you're a child, you have no choice. You have to try and build a life with the last strands that you have. And unfortunately, after this portion of calm and relief that it brings them both through fishing and through all these experiences and some genuinely tender moments between the two of them. But ultimately, it's that letter that sets him off. And it was an inevitability. It's the flaw in his character that prevents him from ever being anything like the father that children would need.
Oh.
It's heartbreaking. It really
terrible.
is hard to read. But at the same time, it feels real. It feels like a tangible relationship, and you can't help but become fascinated by it and wrapped up in it.
Unfortunately, I think it speaks to our modern society today. It's not it is not a news story that parents are pieces of shit.
Yeah.
And the fact that she was able to portray a piece of shit relationship so, lost for words, sympathetic.
Yeah.
I guess. I have a great relationship with my papa.
Yeah.
Doug, hello. But I felt reading about the relationship between Pa and Kaya, I was like, that's real.
Yeah.
That's scary that it's real.
Yeah.
But it's real.
Yeah.
You're able to sympathize and be like, oh, that's something that could happen.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because in life, especially when you're a child, you are at the whims of wherever you are, especially in a position where it as the book details, it takes doing for social services and for truant officers to get the resources to track a lot of these kids down in this position. And again, very different time, a much less developed sense of place than North Carolina is now. Now it's a booming industry and education and tech sector, and then it was still a lot of these small towns and marshlands. And so the first half of the book is just tremendous. I think a lot of it really does. She creates a nice sense of place. I started to worry about Jumpin' and Mabel at this point and how they were represented in the story in their lives, but they still hadn't crossed some lines with them in the second half that I wasn't ready for. Can't really endorse and don't think.
Nothing really was super cringe with them.
No.
It was safe.
Yeah.
I feel like she could have gone a little bit more into their experience a little bit.
Yeah.
They kind of jumped in and out of the story at leisure.
Yeah.
The only time that I felt that was significant, I think we're just merging character talk with story talk, and that's how it's going to go.
Yeah.
We recommend you just read and watch both.
Jump in, baby.
Jump in. Was when Jump In was walking home and those kids threw rocks at him.
Yeah.
And he played it off. Because a man of his time in his situation would have done that. Just that. He would have just played it off. He's not going to make trouble. Right? And Kaya, not having witnessed from her little isolation in the marsh, social constructs like that. She didn't understand why they were throwing rocks at him.
Yeah.
And that innocence that she had and the justice she had early on in the book, I enjoyed.
Yeah.
I wish that would have came out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe would have built her up a little bit more as a justice-seeking character throughout the book to justify some of her other actions.
Yeah.
Sometimes the other actions were a little out of left field for me.
Yeah.
Until the final incident with Chase near the end.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, oh, that's justifiable. But there was like 100 other situations where I'm like, she just hid.
Yeah.
And that was her shtick.
Yeah.
But then she didn't hide in other situations where I was like, why are you not hiding now?
Yeah.
So some of it was for me a little bit inconsistent in character.
Yeah.
In the book and the movie.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up, because I do think that the second half of the book, she deserves a better direction in life than I think being caught up in what becomes it's the hardest part to dissect, because it's kind of a love triangle. It has the structure of a love triangle, but what's really happening is that there is love between one set of characters, between Tate and between Kaya, and there is a power dynamic that Chase is trying to exert on Kaya from a different angle. And I think that is more apparent in the book. This is one of my bigger disappointments in the movie. Because I think they present a version of Chase, I think, in my opinion, mostly through coverage, that feels more empathetic, that feels like it's trying to rope him in as more of a character with a sense of isolation. They're trying to bring that emotion onto him.
Yeah.
In a way that I don't think the book does. I think the book is better at isolating the sense of predation and predatory instincts that this guy has.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that they kind of limit that sensibility with him in the film. I think they do give him a sense to become, or they attempt to make him a more empathetic character. It doesn't succeed, it doesn't work. But it felt jarring to me. And on the other side, you have Tate, who in the book, I think they present a clear rationale for why he leaves, because she's 14.
Oh, yeah, the age
difference
is much more drastic in the book.
Yeah.
And the fact that they added the little snippet in the book where he sees her.
Yeah.
And she hides from fishermen.
Yeah.
And she doesn't see him watching her hide.
Yeah.
And that dichotomy of, oh, she can't survive in social constructs.
Yeah.
I am in the social constructs.
Yeah.
It would be mean to pull her in with me.
Yeah. And exploitative.
Yeah. And I get in the book where he's coming from a little way more than I do in the movie.
Yeah.
In terms of for Chase Andrews, fuck that guy in both things.
Yeah, he's terrible.
But in the book, even Kaya knows he's terrible.
Yeah.
There is a sense of, throughout the whole relationship, I don't know if I love him, was one of her lines.
Yeah.
But he's telling me he loves me, so I must love him if he loves me.
He's a salve for loneliness.
He's a salve for loneliness, not an actual cure.
Correct.
And Kaya even is self-aware of kind of who he is inherently. And in the movie, for me, they try and cover that shit up.
Yeah.
They just pluck him out like he's the golden boy, and that whenever he does the double track on her with the getting married or engaged, it's not because he wants to.
Yeah.
It's because socially it's what he should do.
Yeah.
In the book, no. He does it because he's a womanizer. He's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
he needs to be more of a piece of shit in the movies.
100. That's it. And
Yeah.
it's as you said. You made an excellent point. In the book, I get the sense that she sees through it very clearly because she's very smart. She's an incredibly intelligent person, and that's actually one of the parts of the book that I thought was terrific and deserved more investigation. Is the sense of like we tend to sneer at uneducated people who don't come up through sophisticated institutions and universities and all this. We come to devalue their intelligence when in fact it is so often it's the people who are a part of these communities and these environments who understand them, and it's that connection to environment that gives them this wide breadth of knowledge. Maybe the terminology is different, maybe there is some translation for different settings, but the truth is that there is real intelligence in the kind of folk who know the land and are familiar with it and are familiar with these things. I think that's true in pretty much every culture.
In the movie, the jump that shocked me most, because I watched this movie twice. The first time I saw it was in theaters, was the jump of, "Hi, I'm Tate. Can I teach you to read?" Jump to 5th reading lesson.
Yeah.
So we don't actually, and him like articulating that she's so smart that you'll never not be able to read again. I thought that was important to note, but also it doesn't showcase, I don't know, how superiorly intelligent she is over him inherently.
Yeah.
When it comes to the marsh, because she has so much more experience.
Yeah.
Experience makes intelligence, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, like, yes, he goes to get the official degree from Chapel Hill in the book and in the movie. But in the book, there's points where she points out stuff that he's like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or even his inner monologue in the book is like, she is so much smarter than even I give her credit for, and I'm the only one acknowledging that she's smart.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like some of the translation of character to book to movie for at least Kaya was that intelligence level.
Yeah.
It kind of dumbed her down in the movie a little bit.
They make her more of an object in the movie.
Oh,
in the movie, she is the object of desire, because I think that's essentially, I think that's how studios read a character like that. That's how you tell a story about a woman on the face of it, flanked by 2 men. That's the only way they can interpret these things, is by creating her and centering her as an object, when in fact she is the observer. And in the book, it feels so much, and obviously this was the writer's intent from the perspective, but she is the observer of the things that are going on. Very rarely do you stray from that. It's really only Tate's perspective. Occasionally, very rarely, with
way,
yeah, which also brings his father, a fisherman. Starts with an S. I'm looking at his name. Scupper. That's it. And like he's such a fascinating character. And I keep thinking like that's a relationship that could be fascinating to explore in even more depth, because he tries to imbue in his son a sense of appreciation for beauty, a sense of appreciation for that. There's that great transaction about poetry where he says, "Oh, we're studying poetry and I don't like it and I don't get it." And like he's like, "Well, it's supposed to make you feel something."
Oh yeah, poetry though.
Yeah.
Imagery in the book.
Yeah.
Definitely something missing from the movie.
Yeah.
I wish that they would have had a little bit maybe more voiceover. The thing that they cut that I thought was such a great thing. The poems that were included in the book, they kind of had little snippets of her reciting poems from a quote author she liked in a local newspaper. And those poems correlated so well for the time and place and the situation she was in at that current moment.
Yeah.
And by the end, folks, we reveal that she's the one that was submitting these poems to the newspaper. Pseudonym Amanda Hamilton.
Yeah.
Loved that reveal.
Yeah.
I wished it was in the movie, but I understand why they cut it.
I do too.
You know? It wasn't 100% necessary.
Yeah.
It was just a nice, fun thing at the end.
Yeah.
Which they could have added with, I think, minimal effort.
Yeah.
It was a give or take, I guess, for editing purposes, which we'll talk about the editing and actual technicality of the movie itself in a little bit. But, like, I was kind of missing it. Not gonna lie.
Because here's adaptations are hard.
Mm-hmm.
Good ones are hard to make because this is different. This is about sequels, but I think when they were making Back to the Future 2,
Oh,
they asked Zemeckis and Bob Gale, like, so what are you going to do? And they're like, well, you have to make the same thing that the audience saw again, but it has to feel better. Something to that effect of like, so you have to make the exact same thing, hit the exact same point of lightning, and it has to appeal to the audience. I don't think it's that different for adaptations of written works. And sometimes the key to an adaptation is choosing when to work with and against the material. Mm-hmm. So the two classic examples that can be questions of translation and improvement are Jaws and The Godfather. So you have two books that were generally regarded as dime store paperbacks when they came out. Nothing particularly special about them. But they were optioned and given to certain directors who saw what needed to be reinforced, what needed to be removed, what the larger point of the story was, even if the authors didn't quite understand it. And you see that on display with Where the Crawdads Sing, I think, in a big way, because there are a lot of things that I just think that they should have embraced with the adaptation that they simply didn't. And some instincts that they could have worked against, that they could have revised for the film, and it happens all the time, that could have struck a chord that maybe the author missed. And I think that's fair. I think when you option material to be adapted, you gotta trust their process, and that's the risk of it. You have to trust that the filmmakers understand the strengths and weaknesses of your story.
For sure. The phrase "killing your baby" comes to mind with adaptations in particular, not just regular screenwriting, but like in order for drafts to be made, edits to be cut, things even on the cutting room floor. I'm sure there's stuff that they had shot that we don't get to see because it again is just a little over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Which begs the question: do you think that this should have been a TV show versus a movie? That's a big one because you have 7 to 8 hours of limited series versus 2.
Yeah.
Do you think this was a good choice to do a movie versus a TV show?
I'm going to give my short answer, then I'm going to hear your short answer, and then I think we can divulge from there. I would say this would be probably better as a miniseries than a movie, but I could see an argument for a slightly longer film. I think this is the rare exception where I would have said it could have been 2.5 hours. A lot of movies these days can be cut down at least 15 minutes to 20 minutes. I could have watched 15 more minutes of this, I think, if it lifted up a lot of the material, and I think some key scenes could have done that. But I'd say miniseries.
Gotcha. I am going to have to disagree, but agree slightly. Agree to add 10, 12 minutes to the movie.
Yeah.
To give a little bit more imagery. The thing that you could have done with the miniseries is more beauty shots, and sometimes those piss me off. You know, like if there's so many, but in the terms of this story, the beauty shots of the nature play a significant place in the story in terms of picturing that isolation, picturing where she's coming from, where she's growing up. Like, I think in the movie, that part was a little rushed. They intro her. She's a kid for like 0.2 seconds.
Yeah.
She grows up. She runs away from the cops right away in the movie. And I'm like, I don't feel for her. When she runs away in the movie, the fuck you're running away from if you're not guilty?
Yeah.
Like, that is the feeling initially that I got. In the book, when I read her running away, it was depicted a little bit more out of surprise.
Yeah.
Not necessity.
Yeah.
In the book.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of those specific scenes that could have been drawn out in a miniseries.
Oh yeah.
That would have been a little bit better. But they could have just adjusted it a few minutes to be like a little bit more drawn out.
Yeah.
In terms of filler scenes between her learning to read and the cops coming for her in the time jump.
Yeah.
It just, editing wise, was a little funky for me.
Yeah.
It kind of messed my picture of the character up a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So partly agree, partly disagree to your statement.
Yeah.
So let's get into kind of the more film details
Sure.
we'd love to talk about.
Yeah.
Obviously, like your background's in film.
Yep.
My background's in writing and film.
Mm-hmm.
Casting.
Yeah.
What did you think about the casting? I'm very curious.
I have IMDb up right now.
Cool.
Just so I can organize my thoughts here. So let's start at the top. This is, I am sorry to say, the first performance by Daisy Edgar-Jones that I have seen.
Okay.
So this is the first experience that I have had with her performance here as Kaya Clark. I think her casting is quite good. I think that she does carry off the energy that you need from this character. And I think that there is an air of innocence that she achieves. And you also see the notes of frustration later when she's imprisoned, when she's caged in by the world. She does a lot with a minimal set of expressions. And I think that she has to be applauded for being able to shoulder that kind of character. I think the only issue I had was with how she was written. She was underwritten in the film.
She definitely was, because so much of the book is internal monologue and loneliness that is hard to portray.
Yeah.
As by an actor, apart from just staring in silence.
Yeah.
And like you don't know what's working in anybody's head.
Yeah.
I don't know what's working in my cat's head.
Yeah.
He is nothing going on in there. Sometimes when I looked at Kaya in the movie, nothing going on in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, but I don't think that's the acting. It was the writing. I think if the writing fell a little short in terms of helping the actor along. Now, there is something to say about great actors taking shitty material and making greatness.
Yeah.
Rare.
It's hard. And especially if you're getting notes that you think you got to follow, you're going to follow those notes. And unfortunately, and that's the other thing about film. You do so many takes, you do so many variations, sometimes footage gets cut, and there's a version of your performance that exists in your head that does not exist on film. And it happens all the time. It happens sometimes for reasons beyond your control. It happens because it was the wrong time of day for the shot, and the reshoots, you just didn't have the same energy. So it feels flat, it just drops. And whenever I was watching her on screen, I felt like I was watching a talented performer wait for substance.
I'm going to have to agree that I think Daisy Edgar-Jones, again, also my first time watching her in anything.
And I've heard she's great in other projects.
Great, amazing.
Yeah.
I will watch her filmography for sure. Who directed this?
I think this is one of her first big feature credits.
Okay.
Oh no. She's worked in TV. She's directed for series like FBI, like Chicago PD.
Okay.
She has a film coming up, according to IMDb, an untitled Roe v. Wade project. So she is.
Who's the director?
So the director is Olivia Newman.
I think that actually makes a lot of sense to me that this is one of her first forays into feature directing. But the way that the performance of Kaya at least read on screen was very scattered.
Yeah.
You know? When I was watching it, at least from like when I was trying to break down the character performance itself, it seemed that the guy was like getting, that Olivia Daisy was getting conflicting notes.
Yeah.
Signs of a director not really, she's more experienced in TV, but with features working with one particular character.
Yeah.
And trying to condense the performance into 2 hours versus having an entire season.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like she couldn't really hone the direction in.
Yeah.
The performance wasn't cohesive for me.
That's fair. Yeah. I agree 100%.
Yeah. So in terms of directing, I'm going to rank all of my things on this entire podcast out of 10. Would say directing wise, probably a 6. Writing wise, probably a 4.5.
Yeah.
On the screenplay. Sorry to say, it just, for me, was missing too much for that. In overall production, probably a 6.5, 7. Lighting, costumes, background characters, casting in general, fine. But what I think Daisy could have given an 8.5 performance.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. The talent of like what she was given based on like the average of, I would say, a 6.
Yeah.
On everything else, brought her down to like a 6.5, 7.
Yeah.
In terms of performance for me, it was just not balancing out. If everything was a consistent 7 or a consistent 8, that would be different.
Yeah.
But I feel like we were just kind of trying to pick up the pieces from the rest of everything.
She was always at a simmer. That's always kind of how it feels in the film, is her character is always at a simmer and it never quite boils. And I think that's, I don't think this wound up in the right hands to render the kind of production that would communicate the themes to an audience correctly. Because I just think they misinterpreted the best parts of this material. So I would agree that writing is probably, I think, 4.5, maybe 4. I agree with your directorial ranking as well, because I think I see potentially a very skillful, focused film director at some point, but it's that transition from TV to film can be difficult because you are switching streams in a big way. Production schedules, the motif, the marketing schedule, everything changes. And that, I mean, like, legendary directors have had a hard time making that switch and that transition. So everybody has to give it a shot at some point.
Oh, I feel like she is just starting.
Yeah.
I think this was a great starter.
Yeah.
But you mentioned market just now.
Yeah.
Going back to the fire that this book had, right? At the beginning of our recording.
Yeah.
They were trying to get this shit out.
Yeah.
They wanted to ride that Where the Crawdads Sing wave.
Yeah.
And I think it was rushed.
Mm-hmm.
They could have spent, I feel like when the book first came out, because I remember hearing about the book on Reese Witherspoon's reading list.
Yeah.
To the movie coming out was like less than a year.
Yeah.
You know, like it could have been more.
Yeah. It was underserved and
it was underserved. And that's sad because I do like the story. Overall, watching the movie, I was in the theater. I walked out the first time I saw it. I was like, that was a movie. It was fine.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to watch this again.
Yeah.
But I wanted to read this book.
Yeah.
So I watched it again.
Yeah.
You know, But it's not something, the movie is not something I would reach for. So overall, adaptation quality, 0 out of 10. What would you rank this one? That encompasses everything we've talked about. We didn't really get much into the story plot, so when we said spoilers, it really wasn't that much.
Just some character stuff.
Some general adaptation stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to start like a blog to go in depth?
It's not a bad idea. Also, I think it'd be cool to explore some of the apps like Letterboxd and the Goodreads is the other one. I think maybe it'd be fun to start writing about on the products on those platforms. Yeah,
we should definitely coordinate and go a little bit more into detail and similarities, differences, plot points.
Oh, yeah.
And just talk about general stuff on here.
Yeah.
That's probably a better idea.
100%. And I also think what's exciting about this, especially being the first episode, is it gives us a chance to establish, I think, the philosophy of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think I was talking with my wife, Julie,
hey, Julie.
Earlier today. Hi, Julie, friend of the pod, friend of my heart. About why this was such an interesting first adaptation to read and watch and process, is that it has all those elements that make an adaptation worth doing. You have an audience that is clamoring for some version of this, some film version
maybe
of this.
Too quick,
maybe.
Of a clamor.
And you have a story structure that in parts is really gripping and like really, really inviting, even if that second half doesn't really fulfill the promise of the first half, which I don't think it does. I think it could have been a much more fascinating story. I think, as you said earlier, about the idea of her concept of justice maybe projected onto the world and the sense of larger injustices that are occurring around her in that time and in that place. Because she's such a fascinating character. There's just so much more that Delia Owens could have done with her, and then maybe the filmmakers could have constructed around her. So as an adaptation, I really would put this at about a 3. It's pretty rough for me.
Brutal.
Because I just don't. I think adaptations don't have to be 1-to-1. They just have to capture the essence of a story and distill the point of telling that story in the first place. And it is a shallow theme park interpretation of a complex character that could have had even more potential than its author, I think, understood. And so I just don't think it served very well.
I will give my number at the end.
Okay.
But your comment on 1-to-1
Yeah.
is what the movie did. Unlike some other adaptations, they didn't miss the details. But the details of the book that they included were not that important.
Mm-hmm.
So the 1-to-1 was there.
Mm-hmm.
But this was one of those situations where it didn't have to be.
Yeah.
Like the hat fibers, the cat was important, but could have done without the cat. You could have done without in the movie, I think they went a little bit into like the bus schedule, like the actual murder trial details.
Mm-hmm.
All of that was there. The feathers, the spark plug that he leaves her in the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? Some of the things that were 1-to-1 are quick. You don't need a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's fine. Makes it a good 1-to-1.
Yeah.
But other stuff, I think there could have been more selective 1-to-1s made.
Mm-hmm.
Does that even make sense? Like,
yeah.
the details that were there, because when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, it's like watching a first grader's interpretation
Yeah.
of the book
Yeah.
on screen.
Yeah.
Nothing's wrong,
But it's very flat.
but it's very flat.
Well, and I think that what's interesting about that, mild digression here, is how she alludes often, especially at the end, about how her conception of love had only been informed by nature and unfortunate circumstances, and then she sees in Tate more detail and comes to accept humanity more. And so I think it sort of ties in with the idea of even the book itself is like surface level doesn't suffice for a life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So overall, I'm going to say my rank 3.5.
Yeah.
I give a little bit of credence to the fact that I sat all the way through the movies.
Sure.
With severe ADHD. I finished it, which doesn't always happen,
Yeah.
but it happened.
Yeah.
And the fact that I read the book in 2 big sittings.
Yeah.
Like I have a busy schedule. Sometimes I was like finagling pages here and there, but I did a good chunk all at once. So it captured my interest. So I give it a 0.5 higher than you.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's fair. You know what? I'll give it another 0.5 for Taylor Swift's end credits song.
Oh gosh.
Which was
Swift.
great. It was like, because here's the thing. I'm not a Swift mega fan. I'm not a Swiftie. I'm not anti-Swiftie. I like Swift.
You exist in the Swiftosphere.
I exist in the Swiftosphere, and I just have to accept that.
Yeah.
Like gravity. But I've always liked Taylor Swift, and she wrote the tie-in song with the Civil Wars, I think, for the Hunger Games, Safe and Sound.
She did,
which was another incredibly evocative song. She is such an evocative songwriter, which is what ties her in so beautifully to the book. And I understand that she was a fan, which is what drew her to write the song. And then you understand the appeal to her, and she has such a knack with that same imagery. And it's the credits roll. I used to work as years ago. I worked at a movie theater. I was a cashier and concession station attendant. And
It sounds so official.
You know what? There was when
attendant.
I applied, the title was concessionaire,
Oh
which
my
feels like a
gosh.
term they haven't used since 1932.
I want that.
It was kind of cool. That's how I listed it on my resumes for a long time, because it sounds like a lot cooler than what it was, which was,
Popcorn.
yeah, popcorn guy. Oh, that was actually pretty fun. It was still one of my favorite jobs. I worked at a little 3-screen called the Capitol Theater back in Cleveland, Ohio. It's an indie sort of modeled 3-screen theater. It's a small thing. It was a refurbished theater from the 1920s. Beautiful, beautiful space. But there's that thing whenever I go in to clean out a theater after a movie had finished. You get to watch the credits and you hear the music playing over the credits. And if I had heard this song playing over the credits of this film, that would have been my first impression of the film, and it would have colored it differently completely for me, maybe.
Oh.
Because it is such a well-written and beautifully, hauntingly sung piece that you're like, man, I wish the movie had been better.
Yeah.
That's like a 9 out of 10, maybe 10 out of 10 movie song.
Yeah, I wonder
Quite
what
good.
Taylor Swift thinks about this movie.
I was thinking that myself.
I would be interested. Hey, Taylor,
Yeah.
what do you think of the adaptation that you provided song to?
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to remake this? In the age of remakes within our lifetime, do you think this will be remade? Or is it not worth it?
So I think it's possible, and here's the example that I will cite, because I, at various points, have had the Criterion channel, a Criterion subscription, and it's like beautiful collection of films. And Julie and I was like a Sunday morning. We're like, we want just a movie to watch in the morning. We have nothing to do that day. And so we land on a late 80s, I believe, early 90s adaptation of The Handmaid's Tale, featuring Robert Duvall, among others. It's a huge cast, and it is a mess.
Of course.
It's not very good at all, because it was made at a time where I don't believe that any women were involved in telling a story about the subjugation of women. And
makes sense.
It just doesn't read like it reads like a movie that was written by men with the barest possible sympathy for women. It just doesn't feel like a good adaptation of the story. And then years later, you have the Hulu adaptation, which at least the first few seasons I thought were exceptional television. That paid, as I understand it, because I haven't read the book. Maybe this is another fun adaptation to do.
But it is a good one, because I have already read the book and seen only the first season of the Hulu show is the book.
And it's the first season is quite good.
Yeah. Anyway, continue.
But I could see Where the Crawdads Sing 20 years from now. Somebody comes back to the material and says, this was made as like this film, and the turnaround is really quick, and we don't know if we optioned the right people or the studios were willing to give it the right consideration. Maybe the novel was too big in the minds of the audience. They didn't want to stray from the adaptation too much in terms of story, and they weren't willing to maybe strengthen the fundamentals of the story and make it a real masterpiece. I could see that being the case, where someone gives this a bit more of the Tree of Life treatment, and gives it the chance to be a 2.5 hour movie that maybe embraces the setting and embraces the character. It's not unlike Charlie Kaufman's Adaptation, where he goes on to work on Suzanne Orlean's Orchid Thief book.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole concept of the movie is that he can't do it. So it ends up being this like long lilting tale about the story, but like ends up being a pretty interesting, rewarding tale because they find the strength around it. So I could see this being the case where 15 years from now, 10 years from now, someone's like, it was rushed. It could have been stronger. It could have been this. On the other hand, this was a box office success. So maybe it'll be a while before anyone has the consideration to say, I think I could find something stronger in this. I could find something more compelling. So I think maybe, but I think it'll be 10 years from now.
Oh, I think maybe, again, like you said, in our lifetimes,
yeah,
they're going to try and remaster it to wring it of money.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, I'll end with this. I don't think the source material is iconic enough to be revisited.
Yeah.
The Handmaid's Tale was iconic.
Yeah, 100%.
Even right when it first came out.
Yeah.
How long ago did it come out?
I can't remember. Exactly.
Long time ago.
Long time ago.
And that's just getting the attention it deserves.
Yeah.
So I think if it's going to happen, it's going to be not a movie. It's probably going to be a miniseries or a
That's
short,
how I do
or
it.
it's going to be a more long form thing.
Yeah.
Well, that is it for our first episode, folks. This is great.
This is fun.
This is fun. I love just chit chatting. Well, thanks for tuning in to Adaptation. You can find us on all social medias, pretty much at Adaptation Pod. If you want to shoot us an email, it is adaptationpod@gmail.com. And I think we are going to kind of go into more in-depth breakdowns of story, plot, comparisons of things. If you want more spoilers, this is more of a general overview of what we thought about the adaptation in general. But we'll be releasing that on those platforms as well.
Yeah.
So, any closing words?
No, I'm just excited to begin this journey with you, and reading has been such a salve for me, because I forgot that like the mind needs to digest other kinds of media. I tend to gravitate towards movies and TV shows and video games, and I used to read a lot, and I slowed down quite a bit, and picking up books again is just, it reminds me that it does activate a part of your mind and a part of your ability to process detail and paint pictures inside of yourself that really do become an escape, that really do become a door to someplace new. And so I'm excited to explore that relationship, and I'm just very excited to get this going with you.
Yeah, different worlds. Let's explore.
Yeah.
All right, folks. You have a great day and night wherever you're doing, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.